Ramsey, why is Washington and Wall Street both in a tizzy over Donald Trump's Friday firing of the BLS commissioner? Her name is Erica Mickendorfer. No one knew who she was. Now she's talking the town.
Yeah, it's one of those names you wouldn't have heard about before President Trump took his latest action. He ended up firing her out of nowhere after we had some bad jobs numbers that ended up being revised. They were revised down by nearly 250,000. And so he viewed these new numbers, these new revisions, as some sort of political payback, is what he's posted online, what he's said to the media. And so this really caught folks off guard. This is supposed to be a not very partisan position. And all of a sudden, now lawmakers are getting peppered with questions of whether this was an appropriate thing to do. And how much of Trump's criticism of the commissioner do you think has been valid here?
Look, I think Trump would have had ample stand-in to do this on day one of entering office. For some background, this is not a partisan position. Mickendorfer was confirmed by the Senate by 86 senators last January, including our current Vice President, J.D. Vance. But here's the big issue. The reason why these jobs numbers continue to get revised is because the response rate to the two surveys that the jobs report is based on has been abysmal, and Mickendorfer has not been able to solve it. So before the pandemic, for the household survey, so it's one of the two surveys, the response rate was 82%. Today, it's 68%. The payroll survey is even worse. Before COVID, it was about a 60% response rate, and now it's a 43% response rate. And so rather than the BLS intentionally trying to skew the data, it's more that they just don't have accurate surveys to build upon. One issue where the Trump administration is at fault is not Donald Trump himself, but his Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. He disbanded a committee called the Federal Economic Statistics Advisory Committee, FESAC. FESAC, the advisors on that committee are not paid. So the total cost to the federal government was about $120,000 a year, which is not even crumbs in DC terms, right? That's nothing. Yeah. And FESAC was specifically working on how to fix these response rates, including going to other countries that do a better job in the digital era, right? Because it's much different than it was, 20 years ago, because now everything's online, people don't pick up their dial tone phones, whatnot. So yes, Donald Trump has every reason to say, the next BLS commissioner, they have one job, and the one job is to get both of those response rates up. And this is true for all the surveys the BLS does. But a good way to start helping them fix that would be restoring FESAC. And so Trump is obviously upset about this downward revision, but on net, the unemployment rate sits at 4.2%, which is historically pretty good.
Yep.
So what actually is the state of the labor market now? Is he being a panikin, as he likes to say?
Well, it was definitely looking a lot better before this latest revision. Like you mentioned, unemployment rate's still low. Inflation's still a little bit up there, a little bit higher than they'd want. It's above the 2% mark that you're typically going for year over year. But with this latest revisions, there's a suggestion that the economy has been growing a lot slower than we previously thought. Consumer sentiment still seems to be okay. But again, with these latest numbers, it sort of begs the question of what's to come. With interest rates cuts as well, there's been a lot of pressure, obviously, on Fed Chair Jerome Powell from President Trump to lower these. Powell has obviously not budged yet, but I'm wondering if you think this commissioner's firing by Trump could impact Jerome Powell in some way and what Trump sort of wants out of him.
In two ways, it could achieve the opposite for Trump, right? On the one hand, if you have weak employment data, that improves the case for Powell to cut rates, right? Because he's trying to balance that dual mandate of restoring price stability, which we aren't totally there yet, but also maintaining full employment, which the argument would be if you're getting all these downward revisions in job creation, maybe we aren't actually at the full employment yet, and that would bolster the case for cutting rates. Mm-hmm. But the bigger reason why is because of the bond markets, right? Jerome Powell doesn't want to get too far ahead of the bond markets, and right now the bond markets, the last time the Fed cut rates by 1 full percentage point, 100 basis points, the two rates that Donald Trump really cares about did not fall. Instead, the 30-year fixed mortgage rate and the 10-year Treasury yield both increased by 100 basis points in that time. So the reason why Trump and the Treasury are correctly obsessed with managing interest rates is because We have, $36 trillion in debt. 29 trillion of that is outstanding, and a quarter of that, so roughly $9 trillion, maturing in the next 12 months. And when that matures, it is financed through treasuries. So if you can bring those treasury yields down, it means we're spending less on interest, just on paying down our existing national debt. So it makes perfect sense. You want the 10-year to be lower. You want the 30-year to be lower. But Jerome Powell doesn't control that long end of the curve. He only controls the shorthand. So what you want is Treasury investors to have confidence that American bonds remain the world's financial safe haven. And a part of that is having accurate, trustworthy, and nonpartisan economic data. Again, that doesn't mean that the former commissioner was the solution. It means making sure that you get those response rates up, and whichever commissioner comes next has to have the power to do that. I would argue that involves restoring FESAC.